The following video is provided by the National Apartment Association and is intended for use for the National Apartment Association lease only.
Lease contracts can often seem intimidating. The following look at the NAA FAA apartment lease contract by section is intended to help you better understand your rights and obligations under the lease. Please note that this summary of lease contract highlights does not take the place of your carefully reading the lease. There are important items that are not covered here in great detail. Be sure that you read and understand the lease before signing. Also remember that this overview of the lease is only intended as a general explanation of key lease provisions and should not be considered as legal advice or as a substitute for consulting an attorney. Now we're going to take you through each paragraph in the lease by section. Let's get started. The first section of the lease covers moving in and general information. Paragraph 1, Parties. This paragraph includes the names of all parties to the lease contract, including all residents who will sign the lease. It also requests the name of the apartment community, the specific unit number, and physical address of the dwelling. The owner or manager of the community is also listed in this section, as well as their address. The section also gives the address that written notices to the owner or manager should be sent. Paragraph 2, Occupants. This paragraph includes the names of all other occupants who will live in the dwelling. It specifies the number of days that guests may stay in the apartment without the prior written consent of the property owner. Paragraph 3, Lease Term. In addition to the beginning and ending dates of the lease, this paragraph specifies that the lease will automatically renew on a month-to-month basis unless either party gives a certain amount of notice. If the number of days is not filled in, at least 30 days notice is required. So if you do not advise the property manager of your move-out date and the required number of days before your lease is due to expire, it will automatically be extended for another month, and so on, until you or the property owner gives notice to end the lease. Paragraph 4, Security Deposit. This portion of the lease details the amount of security deposit. The paragraph also informs you as to whether or not your deposit will be held in an interest, a non-interest bearing, or a commingled bank account, as well as the bank address where your deposit is held. You will also initial this provision to indicate that you have received a copy of FS 83.493, which delineates your rights to the security deposit when you move out. Paragraph 5, Keys and Furniture. The number of keys, including those to the dwelling and the mailbox, as well as the number of any applicable access devices, key cards for access gates, etc., are itemized in this section. This paragraph also indicates whether the dwelling is furnished or not. Paragraph 6, Rent and Charges. This paragraph includes the amount of rent you pay per month, where the rent payment should be made, the due date for your rent, initial and daily late charges for delinquent rental payments and return checks. Paragraph 7, Utilities. If the box by any of the utilities in this paragraph is checked, the property owner will cover the cost of that utility. You will pay for all other utilities, including deposits and charges or fees on those utilities. Paragraph 8, Insurance. The property owners will not cover your personal belongings. You are strongly encouraged to consider purchasing renter's insurance to cover your personal property in the case of theft, fire, smoke, or water damage, etc. This paragraph also provides a checkbox as to whether or not you are required to purchase liability coverage. If no box is checked, you are not required to purchase coverage. Paragraph 9, Locks and Latches. This section informs you that locks will be rekeyed after the prior resident moves out. The rekeying will be done before you move in, or if the door has a keyless deadbolt, within 10 days of you moving in. You may also request deadbolt locks and other devices to be installed at your expense. Now that we've covered the general move-in information, let's take a look at the next lease section covering special provisions and what-if clauses. Paragraph 10, Special Provisions. Here you'll find any special provisions that will become a part of the lease and override any conflicting information contained elsewhere in the lease. Also, this paragraph notes that any attached addenda or written rules become a part of the lease as well. Paragraph 10 may continue on page 7 of the lease contract. Paragraph 11, early move out. This paragraph states that if you move out early without paying rent for the entire lease term, you will be liable for all rent owed at that time and will continue to be liable as rent becomes due. You will also continue to owe rent as it becomes due if you move out at the property owner's demand because of your default or if you are judicially evicted. If you move out early, you will also pay for any rent concession that was given to you. Paragraph 12, reimbursement. You'll be required to pay or reimburse the property owner for any damages caused by you, your spouse, occupants, or any guests. You'll also be liable for any charges incurred because of a violation of the lease or community rules, or property damage resulting from negligence, improper use, or other conduct by any of the parties mentioned above. You will also be liable for damage to doors, windows, or screens, as well as damage from doors or windows left open. Damage from wastewater stoppages caused by improper objects in lines exclusively serving your apartment will also be charged to you. Paragraph 13, contractual lien and property left in the apartment. If you are delinquent in paying your rent, the property owner can seize and store your property under a contractual lien to secure payment. There are statutory guidelines for when and how this must happen, and what it will take to get your property back. This paragraph also states that the property owner may store, but does not have a duty to store, property removed after the surrender or abandonment of the apartment. Paragraph 14, failing to pay the first month's rent. It's critical that you pay the first month's rent before or by the beginning date of the lease. In the event you do not, the property owner can terminate your lease and sue you for damages, future rent, attorney's fees, court costs, and any other lawful charges. Paragraph 15, rent increases and lease contract changes. During the initial lease term, your rent can't be increased and the lease provisions can't be changed. The only exceptions are changes allowed by special provisions in paragraph 10, by a written addendum or amendment signed by both parties or by reasonable changes of the owner's rules under paragraph 18. If the property owner gives you written notice of rent increases or lease contract changes at least 5 days before the advance notice deadline in paragraph 3, the current lease will automatically continue on a month-to-month basis with the increased rent or lease changes, unless you give notice in a timely manner to the owner of your intent to move out as explained in paragraph 37. Paragraph 16, delay of occupancy. If you are unable to move into your apartment at the scheduled time because of a delay caused by construction, repairs, cleaning, or a previous resident who did not move out on time, the property owner isn't responsible for the delay. If there is a delay, but the property owner has not notified you, you can terminate the lease under certain circumstances. Again, be sure to review those specifics outlined in the lease. Paragraph 17, disclosure rights. If someone asks you for information about you or your rental history for law enforcement, governmental, or business purposes, the property owner can provide it. The next section of the lease deals with issues you may encounter while living in the apartment. Paragraph 18, community policies or rules. The community's policies or rules become part of the lease, and you and all guests and occupants must comply with those rules. Property owners can make reasonable changes to written community rules if the changes are distributed and apply to all units and do not affect dollar amounts included on page 1 of the lease. Paragraph 19, limitations on conduct. Residents are responsible for keeping apartments clean, taking trash out at least once a week, and using exterior passageways only for entry or exit. All common areas must be used according to community rules and posted guidelines. This section also notes that the property owner may exclude from the community guests or others who are violating the law or any provision of the lease. You are required by this section to notify the owner if you or any occupants are convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor involving controlled substances, violence to another person, or destruction of property. And you also agree to notify the owner if you or any occupants register as a sex offender in any state. Paragraph 20, prohibited conduct. This section outlines a long list of activities in which you, your occupants, and guests cannot engage. You should read the list carefully to be aware of activities that will be considered a violation of your lease contract. Paragraph 21, Parking. This paragraph outlines the property manager's authority to regulate parking of all types of vehicles. It defines what is meant by an unauthorized or illegally parked vehicle and gives management the right to tow those vehicles. Paragraph 22, Release of Resident. You are not entitled to terminate the lease and move out early, except as outlined in the lease. This paragraph explains that school withdrawal or transfer, marriage, separation, divorce, loss of employment or a job transfer, bad health or death, among others, will not end your lease or your obligations under the lease. Paragraph 23, Military Clause. This paragraph outlines when and how a member of the military is able to terminate the lease. You must give written notice, meet specific criteria, and have official permanent change of station orders or a deployment letter or order. Paragraph 24, Resident Safety and Property Loss. This paragraph covers several important topics, including detection devices, loss, and crime or emergency. First, let's discuss detection devices. Smoke detection devices are provided for your protection and that of other residents. You agree to take care of and use these items and to make every effort to follow the security guidelines included in the lease on page 6. The property owner will furnish smoke detectors, test them, and be sure they have working batteries as of your move-in date. After you move in, it's your responsibility to replace batteries as needed and to immediately report any detection device problems to the management. Now let's talk about loss. This paragraph outlines your responsibilities during bad or freezing weather and emphasizes that the property owner is not liable for personal injury or loss of personal property because of natural forces, theft, or vandalism, except as required by law. This section includes information on crime and emergency. You should dial 911 immediately when any crime or emergency occurs, and then contact the property owner or manager. This paragraph outlines the property owner's responsibilities as they relate to security and your obligations to provide a report to law enforcement and a written report to the property manager in case of an incident. In the section entitled Fire Protection, you will be notified if fire protection is available. Finally, under Building, Housing, and Health Code section, the owner's responsibility under the lease are described. You are informed that the owner is not responsible for the repair of conditions created or caused by your negligence, wrongful act or omissions, or those of your family or any other person at the apartment community that are present with your consent. Paragraph 25, Condition of the Premises and Alterations. By signing the lease, you accept the apartment and all that comes with it as is, except for conditions that may affect your health or safety. You are not allowed to damage the unit, repaint it, or to alter it any way, unless authorized by law or by the property management in writing. The owner will make reasonable provisions for the extermination and pests. If you are required to leave the unit for the purposes of extermination, the owner will not be liable to you. However, rent will be abated. You are allowed to have a waterbed, provided it complies with applicable building code regulations, and that you carry insurance to cover damages that may result. You must provide the owner a copy of the insurance policy at their request. Paragraph 26, Requests, Repairs, and Malfunctions. All requests for repairs and service of any kind must be made in writing, signed by you, and delivered to the property management. You are required to promptly notify the management in writing about water leaks, mold, electrical problems, broken or missing locks or latches, malfunctioning lights, or any other conditions that might be a hazard to health or safety. Even if the property responds to a repair request you make orally, that doesn't mean that you're not still required to make your repair requests in writing. Also, while repairs are being made, you must still pay your rent in full. If there is substantial damage to the dwelling or if necessary repairs pose a danger to you, the property owner may terminate the lease within a reasonable time by giving you written notice. Paragraph 27, Animals. No animals are allowed in the apartment or apartment community unless the property owner has provided written permission. If you have a pet, you'll have to sign an animal addendum and pay an animal deposit. If you violate the property's animal restrictions, you'll have to pay charges and damages, if applicable, and even be subject to eviction. The property owner can remove an unauthorized animal by following the specific steps outlined in the lease. Paragraph 28, when we may enter. The lease spells out in detail who can enter your apartment and under what circumstances. If nobody is home, written notice that someone has been in your apartment must be left in a conspicuous place immediately after the entry. And the entry must be for one of the reasons specified in this paragraph. The property owner does not need to notify you in advance when entering your apartment for one of the allowed reasons outlined in the lease. Paragraph 29, multiple residents or occupants. Each resident is jointly and severely liable for all lease contract obligations, regardless of the number of residents on the lease. That means, for example, that if your roommate moves out early, both of you are legally liable for rent and other charges throughout the lease term. If any resident, guest, or occupants violate the lease, it is considered to be a violation by all residents. The next section of the lease includes paragraph 30, replacements and subletting. If you have a roommate and either he or you decide to move out for any reason during the lease term, finding a replacement resident or subletting is only allowed if the property owner agrees in writing. If the property owner consents, you'll want to review the detailed procedures regarding replacements and subletting in the lease. All residents, both remaining and departing, will still be liable for all lease obligations for the rest of the original lease term. Now let's look at the lease section outlining responsibilities of the owner and the resident. Paragraph 31, responsibilities of owner. This section outlines specific items that are a default, breach of the lease by the owner. It also outlines remedies available to the resident if the owner defaults on the lease. Paragraph 32, default by resident. This item outlines the specific actions that result in a default of the lease by the resident. You should read these items carefully to understand what is considered a default. The rest of this long section addresses the remedies available to an owner if you default. It covers evicting you, the consequences of your holding over, and other remedies available to the owner. This is one of the most important sections of the lease contract, and you should review it carefully and completely. The General Clauses section emphasizes that on-site personnel do not have the authority to make verbal statements or promises that change the provisions of the lease contract. Any change to the lease contract must be in writing and signed by all parties. Paragraph 33, miscellaneous. This paragraph covers a variety of issues that could come up during your lease term. The paragraph includes a waiver of jury trial in the event litigation is necessary. Paragraph 34, payments. Note that money paid to the property owner can be applied first to your unpaid obligations and then to current rent, regardless of your instructions or notations on checks or money orders. If you are late paying your rent, the property owner does not have to accept rent or other payments after the due date. Paragraph 35, NAA FAA membership. At the time of signing this lease, the property owner, the management company for the community, or the locator representing the property owner must be a member in good standing of both the Florida Apartment Association and the local affiliated apartment association for the area where the apartment is located. Now let's talk about security guidelines for residents. Paragraph 36 includes suggested safety guidelines for your protection. The best safety measures are the ones you perform as a matter of common sense and habit. You and all occupants, including children, should follow the security guidelines and use common sense to stay safe. Remember, no security system is fail-safe. Even the best system can't prevent crime. Always act as if security systems don't exist, since they are subject to malfunction, tampering, and human error. The owner and management company disclaims any express or implied warranties of security. The best safety measures are the ones you perform as a matter of common sense. The next section of the lease covers important items you must know in advance about moving out. Let's start with paragraph 37, move-out notice. Before you move out, you must give the property owner advance written notice. Note that doing so does not release you from your lease obligations through the end of the lease term or renewal period. And if you move out early, you're still liable for the full lease term and all the rent due during the full lease term. Advance written notice must be received as stipulated in paragraph 3 of the lease, and the move-out date is designated in this paragraph. Your move-out notice will not terminate the lease before the end of your lease term or renewal period. Not that your notice will not be accepted if it does not comply with the provisions in the lease. Paragraph 38, Move-out procedures. This paragraph basically says that the move-out date can't be changed unless both parties agree in writing, and that you won't move out early unless you've paid all rent for the entire lease term. You also agree that you won't stay in the apartment after the date you're supposed to move out. You are prohibited from applying any security deposit to rent, so you can't deduct your last month's rent from the amount of your security deposit and pay the difference. Paragraph 39, Cleaning. Before you move out, you must clean the apartment thoroughly and follow any cleaning instructions that have been provided. If you don't clean sufficiently, you'll be charged for reasonable cleaning charges, or they'll be deducted from your security deposit. Paragraph 40, Move-out inspection. You should meet with a property representative to do a move-out inspection. Remember, though, that any indications he or she might give you about security deposit deductions or refunds are not binding and may be changed before you actually receive the refund. Paragraph 41, Security deposit deductions and other charges. Be sure to review the detailed list of potential security deposit deductions and other charges. You will be responsible for any charges that are applicable. Paragraph 42, Deposit return, surrender, and abandonment. When you move out, the property owner is required to refund your deposit or give you a written description of any deductions from it within 30 days, provided you've paid all of your rent and given your forwarding address in writing, among other conditions. The last section of the lease spotlights signatures, originals, and attachments. Paragraph 43 identifies any additional lease addenda that will become a part of your lease contract. It also acknowledges that multiple originals of the lease have been executed and that you will be given a signed original for your records. Because you are legally bound by it, the last page of the lease reminds you that you should read the entire document carefully. Although your lease contract is the main document outlining your rights and responsibilities as a renter, you may be asked to sign various lease addenda covering special circumstances not outlined in your lease. Your rental community will also likely have its own community rules or policies as well. These are a part of your lease and must be followed, so be sure you ask for a copy and ask questions about any rules or procedures you don't understand. Now that our general overview of the NAA FAA apartment lease contract is complete, you may still have specific questions for your leasing staff. Please be sure to discuss any additional questions you may have with them before signing your lease. There may also be details specific to your property that the leasing staff will go over with you. And remember that this summary of lease contract highlights does not take the place of you carefully reading your lease. Be sure that you read and understand the lease before signing. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for walking through the lease with us, and enjoy your new place of residence.
Azuma, the appliance leasing company, offers washer and dryers to property management companies, communities, and their residents at competitive rates with superior service.